So, as the head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes, prime time, Deion Sanders says, "Give me my theme music." On this week's edition of Carving Up the Context, we're going to be talking about the late, great Pete Rose, who passed away on Monday at the age of 83 years old. There's no question one of the greatest baseball players of all time. We can go and show you his resume. It's, again, there's few that have come close to matching it. 17-time All-Star, 3-time World Series champion. He won the NL MVP in 1973, World Series MVP in 1975, 2-time Gold Glove winner, and a 3-time National League batting champion. The guy was nothing short of a legend. Charlie Hustle, as they call him, played every single baseball game like it was his absolute last. Of course, when he became a manager for the Cincinnati Reds, he got in trouble because he illegally bet on, or according to Major League Baseball policy, bet on games played by the Reds. Now, again, want to make sure we clarify, he bet on the Reds. He didn't bet against them. This isn't a situation like the White Sox in the early 20th century. This was he bet on his team. Doesn't make it right. I certainly don't condone an athlete doing, gambling in any sense of the word, but this wasn't. Remember Jonte Porter, I think it was Michael Porter Jr.'s little brother, got in trouble with the Toronto Raptors because he gambled, he bet all the unders for his stat. It was a disaster. He's banned from the NBA for life, rightfully so. It fundamentally goes against competition, and it can never happen. That's not what Pete Rose did. But I thought about this, and I've said this on Carving Up Live. Anytime this Hall of Fame conversation has come up in Major League Baseball as it pertains to Barry Bonds, Alex Rodriguez, anybody. And again, obviously, those have been tied to steroids. Guys who have taken PEDs, guys who, to some level or another, have had their career enhanced. Maybe their numbers juiced to a certain degree because of what they were able to do physically, hitting the baseball, pitching, whatever the case may be. No PEDs for Pete Rose. He did not cheat. Obviously, it was not really a thing back then in terms of PEDs, but you get the concept. But I've often said that, I would let Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame, check his numbers. He was a Hall of Famer prior to using steroids. Alex Rodriguez, no doubt Hall of Famer. All of these different situations, Roger Clemens as well. But I've thought about this, that the Baseball Hall of Fame, just like the Pro Football Hall of Fame, just like the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown is more than anything to tell the story of the game of baseball. It is there to serve as a museum. It is there a museum to tell the story of how baseball got to where the history of this beautiful sport. And, we've had conversations in the NFL about guys like, is Eli Manning a Hall of Famer? And it's hard because Eli was an average to above average quarterback most of his career, but he had 2 unbelievable runs, beat the greatest quarterback ever in the Super Bowl twice, and outplayed him twice. It's hard. But oftentimes what I go back to is, can't tell the story of the NFL without Eli Manning. If he got 1 Super Bowl, no. 2 over Brady, that's pretty good. And had a long career, stats, all that. We're not talking about an Eli Manning situation with Pete Rose. Ask yourself, if you had a child and your kid got into baseball for the very first time, and let's say that they were on Instagram or TikTok, which, listen, I'm not exactly, recommending that for very small children. Keep the social media away until they're more emotionally developed. Different conversation for a whole different genre of a show. But say they're scrolling through their TikTok, they're getting the baseball for the first time, and the algorithm is suggesting different baseball accounts and posts and highlights, telling the history of the game, all these highlights. And they're scrolling through and they see this guy for the Cincinnati Reds, and he's running as hard as he can to first place, or trying to score at home. He's he hits for average, all these different things. Effort, playing his arse off every single day for the Reds. You see that, and say they turn to you and say, "Mom, Dad, who's this guy? What's he about?" And you say, "Well, son," or "Well, daughter, this is what he's done. All-time leader in hits, all-time leader in career singles, career games played, career at-bats, and career plate appearances. All 5 records, all of them incredibly notable. Hitting the baseball is literally the goal every single time you come to the plate, is to put the ball in play and to get on base. That's kind of the point of hitting. and you said, hey, by the way, there's a museum in Cooperstown, New York, right, that tells the story of baseball, and he's not in it. And the kid asks, well, wait, why? If he did all these things, how is he not in the Hall of Fame? You say, well, he got banned because he bet on games. And you teach your kid that's not right, and that's all those different things. You're like, yeah, but it didn't affect his stats. It didn't affect his play. Pete Rose was certainly not perfect as an individual. There's no question about that, but the results speak for themselves. The guy's one of the greatest baseball players who ever lived. He was part of the greatest lineup in the history of Major League Baseball, the Big Red Machine. Canseco's, Morgan, Griffey, Bench, all of these guys, and he was a part of that. To me, what this comes down to more than anything, Pete Rose, the lifetime ban was never not lifted, not just because of the gambling. Because we know the gambling in this country, or at least sports gambling, if we're going to keep it to that, the entire, it's changed in terms of legally, right? You can legally bet on sports now. Supreme Court voted for that years ago. The stigma around it has changed in many regards. Like used to back in the day, if you used to watch a show on ESPN 10, 15 years ago, the word gambling wouldn't come out of people's mouths. Now there's whole shows on networks based off it. The stigma has changed. Now it's not for athletes, but the stigma has changed. The culture around it has changed. This is not about gambling with Pete Rose, why that lifetime ban was never lifted by any of the commissioners since then. It's personal. It's personal. There have been plenty of guys who've taken steroids or in the Hall of Fame. We don't have to name names, but they have. That entire era in the 90s and early 2000s, they all used steroids. To some level or another, most of them did at the very least. I don't know, we feel comfortable letting some guys in and not some others. But Barry Bonds is not in the Hall of Fame. You know why? Barry Bonds wasn't the greatest guy with the media. He tended to be, let's be diplomatic and say, aloof. The same can be said about Alex Rodriguez. The same can be said about Roger Clemens. Were all three of these individuals transparent about their steroid use? No, they were not. Does that wipe away what they did in the field? Does anything that Pete Rose did, the lack of transparency that he did show, when it came to when they were looking at whether he bet on the Cincinnati Reds, does it affect what he did in the field? Because again, as we said earlier, the guy bet on his team. Not saying it's right, but it's a lot better than if he'd gambled against the Reds or took the unders on his stat totals. Obviously wouldn't have reached the highs that he did if he did that. It's personal with Pete Rose because they wanted to stick it to a guy who was, again, Pete Rose was a different character. Pete Rose was beloved by fans because of how he played the game of baseball. And because he was polarizing, because baseball has a crippling sense of self-righteousness, they had to stand on their high horse and say, maybe you will get in the Hall of Fame someday. Obviously, your resume, of course, says you should, but you won't get the right to be able to see it. I would have more respect for Major League Baseball if this man never sees the light of day in Cooperstown, or if his legacy doesn't. At least stand on it now that he's gone. Don't put him in now. Sure, his family and those who were close, I'm sure they'll get to see it, but the man you're honoring will not be there to be able to witness what should have been the crowning achievement of his baseball career. It's personal. They wanted the satisfaction of being able to say, hey, got one up on Pete Rose. Just like you did with Bonds, for different reasons, I get it, but for Bonds, for Clemens, for A-Rod, you want us to continue to defend yourself, to be able to put this false image that is flat out not true about your sport. Baseball is as corrupt as any sport in the history of the world. International soccer's got a very strong case. International soccer is probably more corrupt than baseball. Other than that, Deflategate, the main culprit, so to speak, Brady, was basically found not guilty in the last few years. NBA, I don't know. I don't really know you could cheat in the NBA, but if you did, I don't know. They haven't found it yet. We got cameras everywhere. Houston Astros, we just had a scandal 4 years ago. By the way, Astros just got eliminated like a few minutes ago. The baseball world's happy about that. Banging on trash cans. You want to continue to, and you see it all the time, right? It's always the folks who have this who act like they have this moral high ground, all high and mighty, and my way is the best way, and if you are not doing it my way, you are immoral. Isn't always those people that have like infidelity scandals? It doesn't always seem to be that way, or they have some really, really shady skeletons in their closet. Doesn't that seem to always be the case? Be very skeptical of those who act as if they are on this moral high ground above everybody else. Usually it's a sense of overcompensation. That's baseball. That's how baseball has been run over the last 2 to 3 decades. It's why Pete Rose, whether he gets in the Hall of Fame or not, and there's no question he should be in. I don't think anybody argues that. Anybody who has any respect for the history of the game of baseball, and I thought that's what baseball was about, is about respecting the legends. There's a way to play the game. I don't know. I think Pete Rose played the game the right way. The man was called Charlie Hustle. He gave it his all in every single play of his career. It was the best player, one of the best players ever in doing it. Imagine you tell your kid, hey, all-time leader in home runs. Like the ultimate goal for a batter is to hit that puppy over the fence. He's not in the Hall of Fame. All-time leader in hits. He's not in the Hall of Fame either. Because baseball, and to a level its writers, want to preserve this false image of a sport when in reality, again, it's mostly overcompensation. Baseball's great, always will be great. But it was great because of guys like Pete Rose. And the fact that this man will not get to see, whether he's in or he gets in or not, the fact that this man will not get to see himself enshrined with the greats of baseball's past is an unforgivable sports sin that Major League Baseball's committed over the last few decades. Unforgivable. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.